Restaurant Unstoppable. What the most successful restaurateurs know that you don't.
Good. Ready.
Do it. Sounds like Nina. Yeah, so I was talking, we're not scheduled to be here until 2, but I figured I'd take whatever she's ready, she was roll around. Is there a place you think she would want to record? And with excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Chef Nina Compton. Are you feeling unstoppable, Chef?
A little bit today.
Yeah, I don't
the
blame
pandemic
you.
has me down.
I know. It slowed us down, but I feel
It
like,
has.
yeah, I feel like you are unstoppable for what it's
I
worth.
try.
Hailing from the island of Saint Lucia, Nina Compton is a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, Hyde Park. She started her professional career working under the mentorship of Daniel Boulud at his namesake restaurant, Daniel. Nina then moved to Miami, where she continued to work in leading restaurants and hotels, including Conant, did I say that correctly?
Conant.
Oh, sorry, Conant's Scarpetta, where she served as chef de cuisine after being runner-up on Top Chef season 11 and voted fan favorite. Nina moved to New Orleans to open her own restaurant. I know I'm going to destroy it, so I'm just going to let you say it because I want
Lapin.
the Compère Lapin. Thank you so much. In 2015, in 2018, Compère Lapin was followed by Bywater American Bistro, which is where we're sitting today. It's a
Yes.
gorgeous space, by
Thank
the
you.
way.
Thank you.
I love this space. I cannot wait to dive into your story to find out who you are and how you got to where you are today. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Positive vibes all around.
Positive vibes all around. Why does that resonate with you?
Because it's important to set the tone in the kitchen. I think people want to feel positive, not
Yes.
negative and bogged down. I think that also translates in people's cooking when they're talking to guests. I think that's really important to have that positivity, and it just becomes contagious.
So in times like today,
Yeah.
with all that's going on in the world, where do you find your positivity?
You know, it's sometimes you just have to step back and say some things I just can't control.
Yeah.
You know, and I can control what I can, and that's my cooking in the kitchen. That's my recipes. That is, you know, what I put on the plate. I can control that. Everything else I can control. I can control what the state is doing, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I can't control anything else. So
Yeah.
I can just do my little part in my little kitchen and do what I can.
Yeah, I think it's important too to know that we get in our little bubble, right? And we're just like, oh my God, my world is crumbling around me.
Right.
And we forget that everyone's world is crumbling around them. So it
Yes.
feels like a very isolated time. It feels like all we've worked for is being lost. But when everybody else is in that same exact state,
It's terrible.
yeah, but you're also not losing anything because like you're right there next to everybody else.
Right.
you know,
We
relative.
had our guy that checks the chemicals for one of the companies, and he came and he's like, "Hey, chef, good morning. How are you?" And he just came. He's like, "You don't need any chemicals," and like he just had like his shoulders slumped over just because he didn't sell anything to me
Yeah.
today, and he's just like, "Okay, I'll see you next week. Have a happy 4th." So it's on everybody's shoulders, you know, and it's I think during these times I've become a lot closer to a lot of my chef friends, calling in and checking in, how you doing? And it's just, everybody's in the same boat. It sucks right now. And I think that people really want to just vent,
Yeah.
you know, and just let it all out, because, you know, when you hold all these things in, it's a terrible time to be a business owner right now, because you're trying to navigate what's going on with this virus, you know, how it's impacting a business. Is your business going to stay open? So a lot of those things are constantly on your mind. And you could just looking around, you see so many restaurants and so many businesses just closed. And, you know, there's just no light. We're just like trying to figure this out each day.
Yeah. Awesome way to get this thing started. Where does it make sense to start telling your story? When did you know that this was going to be your path?
I was you know, I always cooked with my mom and my grandmother in the kitchen. And I went to school in England for 2 years. And I came back because Christmas is a very big thing for us. Christmas is like the world stops when it's Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's about cooking and celebration and family. And I said, because I always, growing up, always watched my grandmother and my mom and my aunt, everybody would come to the house, all the women in the kitchen cooking. And they would spend hours in the kitchen and then hours after cleaning up. And I'm like, this is terrible. This sucks. And I said one Christmas, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cook Christmas dinner today. And they're like, what? I'm like, no, just sit back and I'll do everything. I'll do the dishes, I'll clean, I'll cook everything. And just seeing them happy and eating, I'm like, I told my mom, I'm like, I think I want to be a chef. She's like, why do you want to be a chef? She's like, it's stressful. It's no money. You're going to be working holidays.
She wasn't wrong.
She wasn't wrong. And she, you know, she's like, if you really want to do that, you need to go work at a hotel or restaurant and really figure this out, because I don't want you to say you want to do this and then hop in, hop out. She's
That's
like,
great advice, by the way.
yeah. So thanks to my mom for saying that. So that was my journey, and I really loved cooking. I loved being in the kitchen, learning new things. And from Saint Lucia, I spent a year working at Sandals. And I said, I'm like, you know, I want to learn more about different cultures. So they had another hotel in Jamaica. So they sent me to Jamaica, and I fell in love with Jamaica. I was there for 2 years. And I just loved seeing the similarities with Jamaican food, but also the differences, and how warm and friendly people were, and just the environment and the dance hall culture and everything.
I'd love to go to Jamaica.
It's the best. And it's so beautiful. The people are so great. It just has a, you know, there's places where it just has a vibe.
Yeah.
You know, like you go to New York,
Culture.
It has a vibe. You go to Miami, it has a vibe. You go to Jamaica, it has a vibe.
Positive vibes.
Yes, exactly. So that for me was really, really fun, you know, as a young chef, you know, just being eager and learning. And my chef at the time, I had worked in all the different outlets in the hotel, and I'm like, chef, I feel like I'm hitting a ceiling here. Like, what am I missing here?
How long did it take you to feel that way? Because you said you started with Sandals.
Yeah, it was. I would say it was 3 years.
Okay.
And I was 21, and he's like, you need to go to culinary school. And so I went back and I told my parents, I'm like, I want to go to culinary school to, you know, to take the next step. And they're like, are you sure you want to do this? So then I went to the CIA, and that was great, formal training. Didn't like the cold.
No. Coming from the Caribbean.
I didn't like the cold. But I still also had this journey of, I'm here in the States. I didn't know how long I was going to be in the States, and I wanted to learn from the best. So that's why I went to work with at Restaurant Danielle.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I feel like I want to reflect on this time. You've dropped a lot on us. I love that you're going through it quickly. I love that getting the big picture. Any key mentors in your life up to this point who really made an impression on you?
Well, it was really my grandmother. My grandmother, you know, every morning I woke up, she was in the kitchen. She was like the chef. She had a prep list. She had, I'm like, Granny, what's for lunch? And she's go down the list, and she's making all these things, and there's like 10 pots, you know, with rice and stews and all these things. And it started off where I'm like, if you want, I'll peel the carrots for you. I'll cut the onions. I'll strain the stock. I'll do all these things. So I became like a little sous chef, you know, at a young age. And it was just, I felt so important helping her out and making the family meals with with her. And it was just nice to just say, like, look, I helped create this today. So
I helped create this today. What was it specifically that you think that you loved? Was it the recognition that you, or like the ability that to be seen for the thing that you're doing to contribute? I don't want to put words into your mouth.
Well, I think it was making people happy. Like, you know, when you make something and seeing their face light up, like, like, because I think food is it touches the soul. It's very nostalgic, where it takes you back to a sweet memory, whether it's a childhood memory or, you know, a family memory or whatever it is. I think food translated back to that time. Yeah. And I just love seeing people say, oh my gosh, this reminds me of my mom's cooking, or something I had when on a vacation. So for me, that was just like, you know, igniting that memory for me was very special. And just seeing people happy, you know, because I want to make people happy. Yeah. And it was doing that through food was very important for me.
And I think like the equivalent with seeing people happy, knowing that you're the root cause of that happiness is, and whether you want to admit it or not, but we're very tribal creatures. And we need the approval of other people. We thrive on it. And I think that a smile is like the best sign
of course
of someone's approval. And like once we need that, if we feed off of that, it's right in there in Maslow's hierarchy of needs of the things that we just need to be happy. And it's so powerful. So, okay. Thank you for getting into that. So back to where we left off, you go to the CIA. What about the CIA? Any key mentors there? Any people that really change your perspective on the industry?
Well, it was just nice to, I still talk to some of the students that I went to school with. Some of them are not cooking anymore. One of them is actually a cop in New York. And I think a lot of people, it was just great to see all these different people from different backgrounds. We had one woman who was a lawyer. She was older and she wanted to be a chef. You had one woman who was an amazing baker, so you had all these different backgrounds, and there were people from all over the world coming to the school, and just hearing their stories and connecting with them was really nice, because getting the formal training for me, studying wines, learning about mother sauces and all these things, for me was just like, I didn't know any of this existed until I went to school. So for me, that was just the first opening for me of just like the French cuisine, being the pinnacle of fine cuisine.
Beautiful. How was that experience for you? Were you successful in school? Do you think that like more successful than other people?
I don't know. I think I did okay. I mean, I think the academic side for me, I did okay. But when it came to the cooking, it was like I was just trying to like suck everything up. Because a lot of the things I was not exposed to in the Caribbean, like Asian cuisine or formal French cuisine or Italian, those things are not present in the Caribbean so much in that setting. So for me, I was just kind of in awe, like, oh my gosh, I'm making all these notes, And
it's been my experience through all these interviews that the people that end up at the CIA who are in their early to like mid 20s tend to do the best. I feel like, I don't know if that's a trend that you picked up on too, but it's always the people who've got at least 2 or 3 years in the experience.
Right.
Their mind is made. They know that they love it, and they always get the most out of that experience.
Well, I think that it's a path that you want to take.
Yeah.
I think if you're younger, you're still kind of trying to figure stuff out, because before I wanted to cook, I wanted to study agriculture, because I thought that was just the thing, because that was our main industry back in the Caribbean, bananas and everything else. So I'm like, I want to study that, and I want to come home. And that completely changed. But I was young. I was 17, 18, thinking that was the right path for me, and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, good thing you got that experience then, right? So you graduate. Why Daniel Boulud?
Because at that time, this was 2001.
Okay.
And, I was looking at all these chefs that have, 4 stars, Michelin stars, also New York Times reviews. So I'm looking at all these people that I want to learn from, because my whole mindset was, I'm just going to be here for school. I'm going to go back home. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to choose one person in the world while I'm here in the States, who am I going to work for? And he was just somebody I admired, and I thought that he was doing something that was really special. And I said, I'm like, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be at this restaurant.
So obviously Daniel Boulud's known for his food.
Yes.
But what was it beyond that attracted you to him?
Well, I just think the structure of the restaurant, he has, so much finesse in the way he presents, the way he carries himself, the way he cooks. He has confidence, and the way he has his kitchen set up is very formal, which I have never worked in before, and that was something that I wanted to really dive into, because I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I want to experience something different, not really be in my comfort zone.
And what did you learn about how he led his team, about the culture of that restaurant? What things about how he did stuff really imprinted on you?
So the one thing I definitely took away from working at Daniel was perfection or nothing. That was one restaurant where I watched everything, in every single thing that they did, and, no food was sent back. There were very few guest complaints, because everything had to be perfect all the time.
So perfect for me might be different for you.
Right. But what their level of perfect is, because I'll give you a funny story. So I was working Garde Manger, and we have cameras in the kitchen, and the maitre d' walks in and says, Thomas Keller's sitting at the bar.
Ooh.
And it's like everybody just stopped. Everybody's like, all right, Thomas Keller is sitting at the bar, and everybody's like waiting for the order to come in, and everybody got a plateau of canapes. And I remember that like the chef de cuisine at the time, Alex Lee, says, choose the best mussel, choose the and have everything laid out. So I thought I had chosen the nicest one, and he's like, why did you choose that? That's the biggest one. And I'm like, because the bigger's better. And he's like, no, it's not. He's like, and he picked up like a medium-sized mussel. It was like really petite. And he says, this is the perfect size. And so those are the things that I took away, where it's just like the focus on all the details is collective. And that's what makes the experience so perfect.
The focus on all the details is collective, and that's what makes it so perfect. So it's trusting everybody in their role to do the thing, and then bringing it together at the pass. So
Yes.
all that energy is going into the little details.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we recreate that in our business?
Well, I think it starts with education of your staff. You know, letting your staff know that, you know, this is the standard. This is what I expect. I think that's a big thing for me. Communicating that with my staff is a really important thing, because if you don't do that, they assume that that's the right size. The way I thought that big mussel was the right size, and I was wrong. So saying like, hey, this size is right, this size is wrong, or this is what you're tasting, and that comes down to training people.
Yeah. So constantly training, constantly educating.
Constantly training.
And again, to put the emphasis back on I think your major point, which was if you teach everybody the details and you teach everybody the standards across the boards, and you let people focus on that element, on doing just that piece right, then you can bring everything together, and the collective will be much better.
Yes.
Is I think the overall lesson that we're supposed to take from that too. And just a side note, I'm going to throw it in here. I saw you like cringe a little bit when you heard the background noise. I want you to know that I love the background noise, because I want people to know that we're sitting in your restaurant. So the more kitchen noise that comes out of there.
I get very hypersensitive when that, because I'm just like, what's going on?
No,
what, you know?
We love it. We love it. It's charming. So don't worry about it. I want you to know that I'm not worried about it.
Then break a plate, guys.
So moving forward, how long were you with Danielle?
It was a year.
A year.
It was a year. And it was because it was just being in New York. I didn't enjoy it.
It's chilly up there.
And
I'm from New Hampshire, and there's a reason why I moved to Texas.
Right. It's too cold, and I didn't like the rat race mentality of just like being on the subway and like rush hour traffic and living in a tiny apartment, you know.
Always somewhere to be, right?
Yeah, you know, it's like I lived in Flushing. Yeah. The last stop on the 7 train after a long day. That's a long train ride, you know, and it was a dead of winter, and I'm like, there's other restaurants I can go to.
So your next move is to Miami, the closest place to home with staying in the United States. Yeah. What was it specifically about Miami though that drew you to that city?
So when I was figuring out leaving New York, I said, okay, if I'm going to leave and I want somewhere tropical, Miami's the obvious reason I would, you know, I'd make that jump. And Norman Van Aken, an American chef that was doing Latin and Caribbean food, and the ingredients he was using were really humble Caribbean ingredients that I grew up with. But the way he was putting it on the plate, I had never seen it before. And I had applied, you know, numerous times. I just never had the position open. And finally, I moved to Miami, and I just took a simple job just to fill in until they had some availability. And I got a phone call that said, okay, we have a position open. And I finally got to work with Norman Van Aken for a while. And for me, that was really a nice segue, you know, coming from Danielle, you know, working at Norman, because it was still very fine dining, but the ingredients changed. Okay. So using things like conch, using things like Scotch bonnet, using things like coconut milk, which at Danielle we never used. So for me, just seeing those things, I'm like, oh my God, I grew up with all these things. I want to use them. And this is actually a cool way that he's doing it.
A little byproduct of getting closer to home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming now the year is 2004?
Yes.
Okay. So the year is 2004. Why? What at this time in your mind? Are you giving a minimum amount of time to these restaurants? Do you have a plan to just do so much time here and so much time there? Do you have a strategy? Like, what's going through your head?
Well, I think at that time it was required that you do a year.
Yeah.
You know, that if you did anything less, people would just like, don't even put in your resume.
Yeah.
Why even waste your time?
Yeah.
But I ended up staying longer with Norman for almost 2.5 years
Okay.
because I was just learning everything. I really liked the sense of the small kitchen and
The weather.
You know, that was a big plus for me. So, but I also saw it as like, okay, if I'm going to make a move, where would it be? And there wasn't really anything going on for that time because, you know, Miami was still up and coming. There weren't a lot of independent restaurants. It was mostly in hotels on South Beach. So they were not, it was just pretty much Norman and maybe a couple here and there. There were not a lot of independent restaurants. It was like the Ritz-Carlton or the Mandarin or the Marriott or whatever else it was. There was nothing else. So that's why I said I'm just going to stick it out and learn as much as I can.
Okay. What were some of the big, 2.5 years, and you must have picked up some lessons on business. I mean, I know you're evolving as a chef at this time.
Yeah.
But did you learn about operations or things to do that you wouldn't have done if you didn't get this experience?
Right. A little bit. I think as a line cook, you don't really get that next financial step unless you become a sous chef.
Okay.
And even then, some people don't really open up their books and say, hey, look at the invoice, look at the price here, look at all these things. So there was a little bit of talk because, you know, fine dining, there is some kind of mentality of like only the best ingredients. We don't care about the cost because we're charging so much money. So those numbers kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
But they still had to be very mindful about not ordering or spoilage. But they still had that cushion because they were charging so much money.
Got you. So when did you really start to learn about the business of restaurants? When did that come into your life?
So 2009, 2008 was the recession.
Okay. Yep.
And I was looking for the next step. And I'm like, you know, I'm getting... You know, I had my whole guideline, like I wanted to be a sous chef by this age and do all these things. And the Fontainebleau Hotel where Scott Conant was opening up, Scarpetta was opening up. And everybody's like, why are they opening up in a recession? They're crazy. They spent $1 billion on this hotel. And I said, I'm just going to apply for sous chef. I didn't have any management experience, but, you know, I kind of knew something. And when I applied, I did a tasting, and I didn't really have the financial side of it, but I saw it as, okay, I'm working in this mega million hotel, so there must be some kind of system in place, which was actually really helpful because for me, coming in, they knew they had all the systems in place. They had software that controlled the payroll. So if I knew that the cook was going into overtime, it would show red and say, hey, Jimmy's going to go into overtime. And then you're like, so it kind of kept you in line. And you're also working with accounting and also the financial people that were doing all the stuff because they would say, hey, your food cost is a little bit high. And I'm like, well, I don't know why. And they would basically print out the P&L and say, well, it's because you spent, you know, $10,000 on, I don't know, truffles, whatever it was, so whatever it is. So they kind of had those guidelines because they knew that a lot of people are not looking at those financial things. They're just looking at running a service and expediting a service. And it's more than that. I think a lot of people think that cooking is just about making great food and having a great service. It's actually the financial side because there's a lot of restaurants that run and you think, oh man, they're crushing it, and they're in the red, which is
I know
a lot of restaurants.
I mean, I kind of feel a little out of place, like, but just talking to people in this city, like a real conversation I just had with Michael Muffaletto was that, you know, you're getting all these industry accolades and I'm from the outside looking in, everyone's like, they're the guys, like they're killing it.
Right.
But at the same time, he was like, during all that time, we were barely getting by. Like we were afraid, like we're like getting all these accolades. We're afraid we won't make payroll that week. Like how messed up is our industry that like that's a thing? You know what I mean?
It's very stressful because the industry, you know, pre-pandemic, you know, people think it's glamorous. Oh, you have your own restaurant, everything is great. I'm like, okay, you really don't know what's going on because I don't sleep at night. I'm stressed out. You're dealing with a lot of staffing issues sometimes. You're dealing with, prices going up for food. So you're dealing with it's a big chess game that you're playing. And now with the pandemic, it's made it even worse. So the chances of 1 in 10 restaurants making it, after year 1 is...
It's now 4 and 5. Or 4 out of 5 won't make it.
It's like 4.5.
Yeah, right? It's crazy what's happening. So you learned a lot. And is this when you work with Chef...
Scott.
Yes. Okay. So this is at Scarpetta,
Yes.
which is inside a hotel.
Yes.
So when you're so was it the Scarpetta restaurant that was giving you all these guidelines, or was it the hotel?
The hotel.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that work? That dynamic, the relationship between the restaurant and the hotel. Where do you guys draw lines?
So we were pretty lucky that they were not overbearing in terms of, you need to have this on the menu, you need to have a chopped salad, you need to have, roasted chicken. They pretty much left us alone. As long as the numbers fell into place, they left us alone.
So you're getting your revenue from the hotel to do all of your purchasing.
Yeah.
So how would you profit? Would the hotel profit and cut you a check? Is that how it worked?
So the way it worked, we were hotel employees.
Okay.
And Scott is a management deal. So he got a percentage of that.
Okay. Got you. But what are the benefits of what were the things that you like? I think you kind of pointed out the importance of following the numbers, the importance of having a budget, the importance of getting creative to make the budget work. What else am I missing? The key lessons.
Well, I think within the hotel dynamic, I think that having those systems in place, you are held accountable for those things.
Yeah.
Why didn't you make? Why were you over in labor? Why were you over in food costs? It's having those numbers, which a lot of people don't really follow those numbers. They're just like, I'm just going to wing it and then I'll see what's left in the bank account at the end of the year. That's not really a way to run a business. So, there was a saying that we should keep as one of our guidelines is that if you're over your food cost by the middle of the month, it's very hard to make up the last 2 weeks. Okay. Because all you're doing is running out of stuff. Yeah. Just trying to make those numbers work. So if you already have a 40% food cost, by June 16th, you're not going to make it. Because that means you're running out of carrots, onion, steak, whatever it is. Like, you're just trying to make things work. But you just have to be mindful. And I think a lot of people think that sometimes having a bigger menu, more variety means more money. Actually, no, it doesn't.
Why doesn't it?
Because it's more inventory.
Money on shelves.
Money, exactly. So you have a high inventory.
High turn of things.
Exactly.
Not using everything.
So, and then also some of the stuff may or may not sell.
Yeah.
So it's almost better to have a smaller menu, and then you can run daily specials or weekly specials, and then the guest sees, okay, well, they're always having specials or they're always keeping things fresh. So it's not like the same stagnant menu. Got
you. I think the other lesson that was kind of subtle, but it was there, is the importance of using technology to back you up too. Yeah. Like, there's so many tools out there today. Like, you need to be on top of so much. Why not get a little help? I mean, maybe you're spending a little bit more every month to get access to that technology, but how much money are you losing because you're not staying on top of everything, So it's kind of like you got to look at it that way. Yeah. So any other key lessons? And from my research, at this point, you said it was 2008, or were we way more into the future?
It was 2008. I was there until 2013.
So you spent a good chunk there, 5 years.
Yeah.
And I know it was 2015 that you went in audition for a Top Chef. What happened in between those 2 years when you left Chef Scott?
2013 is when I was on Top Chef.
Oh, okay. So you left Chef Scott to go on to Top Chef.
It was the last year I got a phone call. And I was in the shits. It was like a Friday.
So you were in the shits?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're like, can we talk to Nina Compton? And I'm like, yes, speaking, what's going on? They're like, well, we want to send you this email about this show that we're thinking. And I'm like, listen, just send me an email. Here's my email. And I'll look at it, over the weekend. And I never got the email. So they call me back and they're like, hey, we sent you the email. I'm like, I didn't get anything. And I'm like, what is this about? I'm like, I'm really busy. Like, what's going on? And they're like, well, we're scouting for this cooking show. And I'm like, okay, what show is it? Like, we can't really say. And I'm like, listen, I'm really busy. I'm about to go into service. Just tell me, And like, oh, well, it's for Top Chef. So then I'm like, okay. So I'm like, Top Chef. I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm like, well, let me think about it. And Scott had done a bunch of stuff for Food Network and Chopped. And I called him up. I'm like, hey, I'm like, Scott, I got this phone call. I'm like, what should I do? He's like, go on the show. He's like, you might win the money, all these things. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, let me think about it.
What is the prize for Top Chef? Anyways, 100,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I got this phone call to do this show. And she's like, don't do it.
Why?
She's like, you're going to stress me out. Don't go on the show. I'll never watch the show. And I'm like, and I wasn't really in it for the money. I was more of like kind of using it as a platform to let people know about Caribbean food and where I'm from and all these things. And she's like, and I'm like, Mom, I think I'm going to do it. I'm like, what if I win? She's like, okay, but I just won't watch the show. And when I went on the show, Scott said to me, his last words were, whatever you do, be yourself on the show. He's like, don't try and be this character and be outrageous and all these things. He's like, because once the cameras go away, that vision is all that people remember. And since he said that, I'm like, you know what, you're exactly right, because there were people on the show that were trying to be this outrageous character and loud and boisterous, just trying to get attention. And when you look back, I'm like, this guy is a clown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was very thankful for that advice. So we filmed late spring of that year. And I had known what the outcome was. And, you know, Scott said, like, listen, your life is going to get crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're going to start getting emails and phone calls on these things. And I'm like, all right. So the show wraps. I'm run up. And there's no...
How long did it take to record the show?
We do they break it up. So it's 6 weeks.
Okay.
And then I guess they edit and pause. And then we filmed the finale in October.
Okay.
So from then, it was kind of like this waiting period of like, what's going to happen? And I'm like, there's no phone calls, there's no emails. So I'm like, I guess I'm just a dud. And a couple of months go by, and it's just emails and phone calls and all these things are happening. And, you know, I'm still working full-time at the hotel. It's a very, very busy restaurant. So I was scheduling all these things on my days off. So I finish service, you know, at midnight, jump on a plane at 5 a.m., go to LA, do some appearance, whatever it is, fly back, you know, drop my suitcase in the office, and then come right back to work. And I was kind of getting burnt out, and I just said, I'm like, this is not fun. This is not what I want to do. This shouldn't be success, you know. And I told Scott, I'm like, I'm going to take a break and figure out what's next for me, because I'm trying to balance all these things, and I'm you know, there's so many things on the table that I don't even have time to look at them. And he was actually very supportive, and I was very thankful for that, because I was able to step away and kind of process what was being thrown at me.
Okay. So what happened when you stepped away and processed everything?
I had a lot of travel. I was traveling a lot, almost every week.
Okay. So this is all before you got the news that...
Yeah.
It's because you had the summer, basically, into early fall that same year.
Yeah.
So were you just kind of trying to collect yourself? And
well, you know, at that point, I had a lot of people just asking me to do like cooking appearances, do all these things.
Because at this point, the show is...
It's still rolling.
Still rolling.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was just trying to just take some time off.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, traveling a lot. It is, people think it's glamorous. It's very tiring, you know, and, you know, if you fly to LA, you're dealing with the time difference. And then it's, you know, you got to be at the airport 2 hours before.
Yeah, and you're in a strange place. You can't even go to the grocery store without checking your GPS first. And I can totally relate.
So it is exciting, you know, when you do it, and then after a while it's just like, I'm over it. Yeah. You know, so with the travel, that was just keeping me busy at the time. And during that time, people were saying like, hey, why don't you open a restaurant in Miami? And we were like trying to venture out and do those things. And we looked at a couple of places in Miami, and the rents were just so high. Yeah. Like insanely high. I'm like, how do people pay $75,000 a month? Jesus. Just for rent? And we had looked at a space that we had entertained a little bit, and my husband and I'm like, yeah, it could work, you know. And then he's like, okay, go home and do a business plan. Like, just do a schedule of how many staff you're going to need, dishwashers, everything. And just for back of the house, it was like an insane number, just for the payroll. And I felt sick to my stomach because I'm like, this.
Do you remember the number?
It was something like with the rent, because the rent was $30,000. Just for the back of the house, it was like 20 grand.
20 grand a month.
A month. And that doesn't include servers or food or anything else. And I was thinking to myself, I can't imagine the summertime when it's dead dealing with, you know, a hurricane or any of those things. You still have to pay that rent.
Yeah.
It's still a fixed cost.
Yeah.
So I just could not stomach that. And I'm like, I don't want any part of that.
Okay.
And you know, we had other offers in Chicago, New York, all over the place. And my husband was like, well, if we're going to move, where do you want to move to? And I'm like, I don't want to move back to New York. And we thought about it. I'm like, well, we can find
or Chicago.
You know what I mean? I'm like, if I'm going to move to New York, I want to live a block from the restaurant, above the restaurant. I don't want to deal with trains or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, you start looking at the rents in New York, and I'm like,
yeah, it's just like Miami.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it didn't make sense.
We're back, and now you're getting all these offers. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do. What was your relationship with Scott at this point? Was he resentful that you left?
No, he was very supportive because
you gave him 5 years.
I mean, Scott and I still talk.
Yeah.
You know, to this day, he has been my biggest cheerleader and very supportive. And he knows the game. I mean, he's been in the same position as a cook, becoming a sous chef, becoming a CDC, and then getting an offer. So he knows what the progression is. So for him, and I spoke to him even after I left about the deals I was getting. You know, he's like, listen, make sure you sign the right deal. He's like, make sure that, and he said the best. Scott is like the best with like one-liners. He says, it's not who you marry, Nina, it's who you divorce. So make sure you sign the right deal, because when you're married, everything is great. But then when you get divorced, they want everything.
Yeah.
And he's had a couple of those deals where that's happened to him. And he said, listen, if you want, I have a lawyer that can read over everything for you to make sure that you're getting a fair deal.
Yes, and that in itself is a lesson right there. Always get a lawyer, somebody that looks out for your interests.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome stuff.
So,
do you want to add on to that?
No.
Okay. So, what ultimately brought you to New Orleans?
So we had filmed our season here.
Okay.
And I always wanted to come here. I had never been. And once we filmed, there was so many similarities between New Orleans and the Caribbean.
Like what?
The architecture, the music, the food, their playfulness. Yeah. You know, that was really like it's. I tell people it's very enchanting when you come here. It has like
the trees. I think are enchanting. In
everything, everything. Just the colors of the buildings. Yeah. You know, everything is. It pulls you in. And once we wrapped, and I'm like, I want to live there, but we didn't know how to get there, you know. And I was actually, I'll never forget, I was in Toronto doing an event, and my husband calls me. He's like, I got a phone call today. It's for a restaurant in New Orleans. And I'm like, no, it's too good. Because we had talked to so many people. And I'm like, this is just going to be another deal that falls flat. And he's like, no, I think this is going to be the one. So I'm like, well, let's talk to the people. We talked to them. And they're like, well, we'll fly you up so you can see the space. And we had walked into Compère Lapin. It was wires hanging, dirt floors. It was a mess. And I fell in love with it. And I'm like, this is the space. And we had walked, I don't know, dozens of places where I'm like, oh, well, it's great, but this needs to be fixed, or we need to add this, or we need to, cut this off, or whatever it was. There was always like some kind of change we wanted to do. With that space, it was just like, even though it's a complete mess, this is perfect.
So was it just the energy that you were getting in that space, or? Yeah,
it was the energy, and I just had a vision of what it would look like.
Yeah.
Whereas most places I walked into, I'm like, how can I can't really see it come together.
Yeah. But it felt right. We knew that. But what about the numbers? Were the numbers right compared to what you were looking at in Miami?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that, we had a team that was able to make things transparent.
Okay.
You know, where again it comes down to the numbers, the budget. You know, as a chef, you know, this is I've opened a couple of restaurants for other people, but this being my first restaurant by myself, my personal restaurant, I'm like, I want the best equipment. I want, you know, as a young chef, you want all these things, all the bells and whistles. And I remember the guy that was doing he was the main contractor, and they had I forget his name, GC or whatever it was. He had the whole budget and everything. So he's like, okay, well, give me your OS&E and your everything that you want. And I submit.
What's an OS&E?
It's operating. Larry. It's operating. Larry.
Where's Larry?
Larry. It's operating equipment and supplies.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Sorry.
So anyway, I just want to make sure I didn't screw up. But anyway, so I submitted that, and they're like, "You're crazy." They're like, "This is the number, and you can't spend $1 over it."
Do you know that number? Do you remember that number?
I can't remember, but it was.
Ballpark?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it was like tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, you're opening a restaurant. You need
it's expensive.
You need 9 pans. You need a blender. You need all of this stuff.
Ovens, range.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so all of these things. It's not just, you know, the tables and the chairs. It's everything else. Yeah. And they're like, this is the number, and I'm like, I can't get like.
So they're giving you the budget of what you were allowed to spend, and you were.
Because I just had given my dream budget. I'm like, well, I'm the chef owner here. I should get everything I want. And they're like, no. This is the number here. Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people, when they open restaurants, they overspend.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you're already in the red to open a restaurant, and sometimes like it comes back to the menus. Sometimes you have to start out small and make some money and say, okay, now I can afford the cryovac machine. Now I can get this. So, I mean, I've seen so many people open up these beautiful restaurants, and then
they have this vision and they want it on day one. And they don't realize that all these incredible chefs that have these things didn't start where they are now. Right. They started with doing what you're saying. They started where they could. Right. And they let cash flow determine their growth. Right. So what... I mean, at this point, you didn't even know that you got second place and fan favorite on Top Chef, right? Yeah. You're still like, wait, like what's the when you're going through this? Is it like September, August? What's the month?
This was late November.
Okay, so you already went on the show.
Yeah, because
you wrapped the show.
Yeah, so that was announced in February.
Okay.
So,
but you already knew you won. You just weren't allowed to say anything to the public, or you knew when you got second place.
Yeah, I already knew. I couldn't say anything.
Okay.
And when after the show had wrapped, when we announced that we were going to be moving here, you know, we were kind of a little scared a little bit, because I'm like, okay, this is a great move. We're moving to New Orleans. We love it. This is great. Yeah. And then I started to get a little scared, because I'm like, wait, I'm moving to New Orleans, and there's all these big chefs here, and I'm a new person, you know, coming in, and how am I going to get received? Yeah. And I was a little bit scared, because, you know, you have Donald Link, you have Emeril Lagasse, you have Dookie Chase, you have the chefs from Commander's Palace, you have all these people that have been around here for a long time, and here I'm coming in new, because also in Miami, at that time when I was there, you saw a lot of chefs, out of town chefs come in, and they come in with their collars popped up, I'm going to crush it. And then 6 months after, they don't make it. Yeah. So I'm like, am I going to be one of those? And, you know, I
Did you ever pop your collar?
No, I didn't. I did. I
kept
it.
That's why you made it.
Yeah. But, you know, I was kind of coming in as I want to just stay quiet for a little bit and like observe and, you know, see what's going on. And people knew I was already coming to town. So we go to restaurants and they're like, oh my gosh, Nina, so happy to see you. Welcome to the city. And I'm like, I just want to have a little quiet lunch with my husband. You know, I don't want to big
Are these
scene.
The restaurant owners or the guests?
Some of the restaurant owners, some of the chefs.
Yeah.
And, you know, wherever we went, people were just like, oh, we're so happy you're here and we can't wait to see you. Nice. So it says something about the city, that people are excited about cooking and something new,
Yeah.
and they're welcoming, and there's no ego behind that. Because I thought, you see a lot of people when people open up in New York, open in Miami, it's kind of like a judgment thing. We're like, oh, let me see what this guy can do.
So back regarding your partners, you said a lot of people were making offers. Did you already select the people you'd be going into business with? Your husband, who's I know he's a partner in this restaurant.
Yes.
Was he a partner in the original restaurant
Yes.
too? Okay.
Yes.
And who else was involved?
So we partnered also with Providence Hotels.
Okay.
So that's where people think that Compère Lapin is in a separate location, but it's actually in the hotel.
Okay.
And that was, pretty helpful because, again, having that corporate structure.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's kind of you came up that way.
Yeah.
Well, it was part of your come up, right? And I know you worked in a couple other hotels before working with Scott. So what are the benefits to that approach to partnering with a hotel? What do we need to know if we're maybe interested in partnering?
Well, I think there's two deals that you can get with a hotel.
Okay.
You can either get a management deal or you can pay rent.
What's the difference?
Management deal is you get a percentage of the profits.
Okay.
Whereas if you're paying rent, you're just a tenant.
You're getting all the profit, but you're paying out a higher.
Yeah, it is a lot, if you have to pay rent in those hotels, because you're still paying back for the construction of everything else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What do you think is the better deal?
It depends.
Case by case?
It depends. It depends on the size of the restaurant, because the bigger the restaurant, the higher the rent.
Yep.
But if it's a bigger restaurant and you have a management deal and you're crushing it, you get a percentage of that.
And you wish you had more.
Exactly. So it all depends.
So what are the things? So the bigger the space, maybe would you recommend management or rent?
It depends, because if it's bigger, and let's say you do, there's some restaurants.
It all depends on how successful the business is, right?
Right. So if you're doing 300-400 covers a night, and your check average is $100,
Yeah. Where do you think people get in the most trouble with those arrangements? What are things that people need to be mindful of if they're considering that arrangement?
Right. I think you have to really think the long term. What do you want out of it long term? Do you want to just, because if you are a management deal, a lot of people just open it up, they put a chef that they trust in place, and they can walk away.
Yeah. So you didn't have to get financing or anything like that. You just sold yourself to the hotel.
Right.
Beautiful. I kind of like that idea. I feel like it takes a lot of the burden off
It
your
does,
shoulders.
because you have that structure in place, and they are very helpful in terms of like guidance. And if I say, hey, listen, we want to expand XYZ, they're open to it. It's all about communication and making both parties money.
Yeah. Were you able to share with your partners your outcome? They're investing.
They knew,
in you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could just tell a very small crew, and again, you didn't really know how that was going to impact everything, because you didn't really know how the people viewing the show would take it.
Yeah.
They could either be like, screw her, or they could be like pissed off, like they were pissed off.
Yeah, and you didn't know that you won fan favorite until February, because that's when the fans had watched it.
Yeah.
So how did that impact your business?
I still get messages, people saying, I'm pissed off that you lost, or you should have won.
Yeah.
So people are still emotionally invested in the whole thing.
What season are they on now? 20 or something like that?
I don't know.
I gotta go back and
watch
I know.
11. Me too.
I know her. All right. So it was 2015 when you opened your first location. Now, 3 years later, you opened where we're sitting today, Bywater American Bistro.
Yeah.
What changed in your life? Like, where were you with your first location that made you feel confident enough that you could step away from that to focus on a second location?
I think we had stabilized enough.
What does stabilization look like?
Stabilization is where you have a team that you can trust.
Okay.
And you can say, okay, guys, this is going on. And, we had been looking for a second space for a while, and we live in this neighborhood. And we were thinking, I'm like, okay, on my days off, whether it's Sunday, Monday, and I'm like, the restaurants here are kind of limited. There's only a few, and there are more restaurants since we've been open coming up.
So you live in this community where Bywater American
I used to
Bistro
live
is.
I used to live upstairs.
Okay, got you. And you said that this area doesn't really have anything, so you recognize that there was a need.
Yeah, I mean there are restaurants here, but they're not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of restaurants that have opened up in this area failed.
Why do you think?
People are saying it's because of Airbnb.
Okay.
I don't really know. It could be just not enough foot traffic. I'm not really
So
sure.
the people that are here in this community aren't regulars.
Well, now they are, because they kind of gave
Okay.
a little bit of pushback on Airbnb. But I think now that when we are looking at the space, I talked to Don Link, and he's like, the Bywater. He's like, why would you open up there? He's like, I wouldn't touch that with a stick. And I respect Donald a lot. He has, a few very successful restaurants
And
in
who's
town.
Donald?
He owns Pêche Cochon, Herb Saint, Gianna, La Boulangerie.
And he's just a friend at this time.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the first chefs that I met when I moved to town.
Okay.
And we talk all the time, and I think he's just a great wealth of knowledge. He is from New Orleans or Louisiana, so whenever I have a question, I always call him up, and he's just very
I love
honest.
that, by the way, that people feel like and I think that's one thing I want to communicate to people is that the people who are really successful in this industry got there because they're most likely generous and
Right.
willing to help others.
Right.
And they're successful because it comes back around.
Right.
And I encourage more people to get out there and reach out to people to share knowledge. That's exactly
Right.
what we're doing right
Right.
now.
Yeah. I think I'm a big believer in communication and
Mhm.
awareness. Just telling people how it is.
Yeah.
Because not everybody can read minds.
Yeah. So I got a little off subject. We're talking about the demographics of the area of where you're opening your
Yeah.
restaurant. You're saying that at the time Airbnb was an issue. How exactly was Airbnb an issue? Was it just?
The neighborhood became very transient.
Okay.
And
So there's no relationships. It's just
Right.
people coming and going.
right. So you have a lot of people just here for a weekend or a wedding or something else, and they were just popping in, popping out.
Okay. So what did you do differently that would work in that market, or did the market change?
The market changed.
Okay.
And you can see more restaurants are opening up in the area now, like Saint Germain. So there's a lot of restaurants coming now because it's stabilized. Because a lot of people are like, well, there's nobody living in these houses, and now people they're living here. So that really changed a lot. And also I think the sense of a lot more people buying houses here has changed a lot.
Mhm.
Over the years, more people are actually buying a house and living here now.
Got you. So reflecting over the past, we're looking at 5 years now as you as an owner operator.
Mhm.
What are the biggest lessons you learned, or things you wish you knew then over the past 5 years that you know now that you would like to pay forward to the listeners?
Don't open a restaurant in the pandemic.
Don't open a restaurant in the pandemic.
No, I mean, I think,
When did you open this location? 2018, right?
yeah.
Are you trying to open another restaurant?
No, I'm just saying life
Okay.
in general.
Okay.
Life
gotcha.
in general.
We haven't talked about life in general as far as the pandemic goes.
Well, I think my advice to anybody right now is just start off small.
Yeah.
I
would actually encourage people to open a restaurant right now. Seriously, because
Why?
Because, well, one, there's a lot of people that were in this industry that are looking at COVID-19 as, okay, like, this is my exit strategy.
Right.
I'm not failing. I'm being forced to shut down, and
Right.
I'm okay with that.
Right.
Right. Number
Right.
two, all these limitations and these restrictions, you're opening up in that. So you don't have to change anything. You can
Right.
start that way.
Right.
And like you're saying, you don't have to open a gigantic restaurant. There's going to be so many vacant small locations that are going to be available. Just start small where
Yeah.
you can and scale into it. I mean, there's going to be, when things turn around, they're going to turn around eventually. There's going to be a lot of more talent on the table than ever before.
Right.
There's so many, like, if you truly love this industry and you're in it for the right reasons, it shouldn't matter if there's a pandemic. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's kind of why I say, like, I encourage people, because everything's a pendulum. It's swung one way. If you can open in the worst of times, you can thrive in the best of times.
Well, yeah, I mean, this has really been a test of nerves.
Yeah.
Because leading up to the pandemic, I think a lot of people, including myself, are very doubtful because I'm like, oh, it's gonna be just like SARS,
Mm.
you know. It's just gonna stay over there, you know, on the western side. And I had gone to Seattle in February, and I remember landing, and everybody's wearing a mask in the airport. I'm like, what the hell is?
Yeah, I was in LA around that same time.
And
Yeah.
I was just like, what is going on here? I'm like, is this a major thing now? And I remember coming back here, and I'm like, guys, we gotta keep on. This is like around Super Bowl weekend.
Yeah.
And I came back, and I'm like, listen, guys, we need to keep an eye on this, because this could be bad.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it was just people taking precaution in case, you know, somebody had it. And I remember I came home, it's like 2 weeks before we had to shut down. And I don't like watching the news because I think it's just so depressing, and there's nothing good on the news. And my husband put on CNN, and Jose Andres was talking about feeding the cruise ship workers and dropping food off that cruise ship that was stuck off land. And I'm like, oh my God, Jose is on the news. I'm like, let me sit down. I'm watching, and Sanjay Gupta was speaking, and I'm like, nothing is good right now, because he's talking about everything. And Sanjay Gupta said, he put up a picture, and he showed 10 people in a restaurant, and one person had COVID. And he said within an hour in that restaurant, they said like 8 out of 10 people had gotten COVID because they were just
On top of each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I remember I came back to work the next day, and I'm like, guys, I had a staff meeting. I'm like, guys, this coronavirus is no bullshit. Like this is serious. And I said, I'm like, every meal that we cook, it needs to be the best meal, because people are coming out because they want to eat and they want to spend money here. So make people remember the food that we are cooking for them, and they want to come back. Because right now people are getting scared, and they're kind of like reducing their thing, because restaurants are in the front line where it's like, don't go to restaurants 6 feet apart, do all these things. And we saw the reservations just start to drop, conventions start to cancel, and everybody's just like, okay, French Quarter Fest, that's canceled. And everybody's like, we need a Jazz Fest. We need that to happen, because that is our spring revenue. That's our money maker. And as long as we have that money in our piggy bank, that Jazz Fest money, that spring money, we know summertime is dead. We'll just get through it. But to lose that revenue, it really hurt everybody, because we don't have any reserves.
So what, I mean, I feel like fine dining restaurants definitely got it hit the hardest, right? But what are you doing to peer into the future? What are you going to do differently with your businesses to evolve, if you think you need to evolve? Like, what's your strategy? What's your plan for the future? Well,
I mean, just downsizing. You know, I think it's very hard to just convert this to like I can't takeout doesn't translate to all restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we've done takeout for a while now, and it's just not. I just feel like our restaurants are not on the radar for that, where people think like, oh, I want takeout tonight, I'm going to order from
pizza or Chinese food.
Yeah, exactly. Those things definitely translate a lot better in that sense. So that was a really a big challenge for us. But now we're opening in for dining. It's kind of like downsizing everything, smaller teams, smaller menu, less inventory, kind of more comfort food, more soulful stuff, and just making that having that sweet price point.
So do you think that you would change your need? Like, would you get out of fine dining to do something more fast casual, more pickup, takeout? Or if you had to go that route, would it just not be worth it for you?
I don't know.
Is that not where your passion is? Yeah.
It's not so much my passion, but I just really haven't thought about it, because it's, I've signed a lease for this space.
Yeah.
So it's not to say like I have a 1,000-foot, space I can just block some areas off. Like, you have a restaurant like this, how do you just say, okay, today we're gonna do fried chicken all day long?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, I feel you. I think we're all just trying to make sense of it, right? I'm looking at the time. You have your very busy day. I want to respect your time. So any other thoughts that you haven't gotten out that you would hope to get out, you're hoping to discuss before we go to the speed round?
I think what I would like to express is the government needs to we're actually working on a bill to get passed that stabilizes restaurants. It's called the Restaurant Act.
Okay.
And that's $120 billion. And this basically will float restaurants until the end of the year. And that is the biggest thing, because right now, a lot of people don't understand that restaurants really, they don't just employ dishwashers and cooks and managers and chefs. They employ farmers, linen companies, wineries, you name
breweries.
it, everything. So when you see those
podcasters,
exactly. So when you have restaurants, and I spoke to a lot of my purveyors when we shut down, just to check in and say how you doing, and they're like, Nina, my business is down 90%.
Yeah.
Because there was everything just shut down. Nobody prepared for it. Nobody said, hey, I'm slowing down. I'm going to order less, or I'm going to do all these things. There was none of that. It was literally open today, closed tomorrow. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were not ready for that. And I think that the government needs to understand 11 million people are employed by this.
Yeah.
We have over 100,000 people just in New Orleans are in the hospitality industry. That is a third of our population.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is the culture. Because people don't come here just for Mardi Gras. People come here for Jazz Fest. They come here for the music. They come for the food. They come for the culture. So imagine if you came here to New Orleans and there's no Commander's Palace, no Dookie Chase.
I don't have to imagine it. I'm doing it.
Right. So imagine if those restaurants don't survive and they say, you know what, we tried and we got to close up. Dookie Chase's, that restaurant is over 75 years old. It was part of the civil rights movement. Those restaurants need to push through this, and it's not just an individual thing, it's collective. So that's why we need to get this bill pushed through.
So what's the call to action if people want to sign something or get on board or
they
create
need
awareness?
so they can log on to www.saverestaurants.com, and there's a petition they can sign, and that goes to their state rep, and just light a little bit of fire. And I think that we're very close to getting this on the tables.
How close are you?
We're halfway, I would say.
Okay. Well, let's push it over the edge. If you guys are listening to this, make sure you go to www.
We really need it.
saverestaurants.com. It's .com,
Yes,
right?
yes.
.org. Okay, .com. And I'm going to take this opportunity also to remind you guys that we just had John Hotaling. John Hotaling, sorry, on the show, the lawyer for Thomas Keller, Daniel Boulud, and all those people that's leading the charge on the business interruption.
Right.
That's another thing, too.
How's that going?
I mean, it sounds like they have a case,
Oh, really?
We actually just published this morning that episode, if you want to listen to John explain how everything went down and why it's a bunch of BS and why we need to get people to head over to wearebig.org also to sign that petition to get these insurance companies to pay out, because they do have the money. They have insurance on this insurance.
They do.
And the people that have that cover that insurance on the insurance have insurance.
Right.
So there's money there, and we need to get it. And he brings up a lot of interesting points. Like, I don't need to get into it. Just listen to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, that I know that was a big thing, because I think what people have to understand is that as restaurants, not just restaurants, but businesses in general during this pandemic, everybody's trying to open up safely, and save their business. But if we just had some kind of assistance where there is some kind of a little bit of cushion, where they say, hey, listen, you have XYZ dollars and this can float you, for 6 months, that takes the pressure off. That takes people trying to open a restaurant, and think about bars. People
the roller coaster of like, oh, we can open, we're being shut. Oh, we can open, we're being shut down.
Well, yeah, you have a lot of restaurants here that have been open, and they were like finally getting back, and everybody's hopeful. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're doing so well. Thank God. They're, this is a good sign. And then they got a COVID case, and then they had to shut down.
Do they have to shut down though? That's one of the things that's a lot of controversy. You might as well. I feel like if you don't, you're basically writing your own death sentence.
Well, I think it's just a risk.
Yeah.
Because you really don't know. Say, for example, if I had COVID and I found out 5 days after and we had this, you might have gotten that, and you may be asymptomatic and given it to 20 people.
Yeah.
So I think the chance of just quarantining your entire staff
It's the responsible thing to do.
It's the responsible thing to do. And also, I think as an owner, what we've been trying to express to our staff is you just can't be safe at work. You have to be safe outside of work. I think a lot of people are just, oh, I'm out of work. I'm at, so and so's bar or their backyard. I'm gonna have drinks, and I know them because we're friends.
COVID doesn't care if you're friends.
People are too comfortable with that.
Yeah.
People think that, oh yeah, Donald definitely doesn't have COVID. I know him. I've known him for 5 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But people have this mentality, this comfort level, and you have to look at everybody like they may have COVID.
Yeah. We are back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor? A habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
Focus.
Focus. What is your biggest weakness?
Impatient.
What is one question you ask or thing you look for when you're building your team?
Open-mindedness.
What is one big challenge for you today? The biggest challenge today?
The biggest challenge today is the future.
Yeah. And what are you doing to overcome that challenge?
Trying to stay positive.
Yeah. What is one code of conduct, or I guess what we call is like a core value, a way you're teaching your staff to be better versions of themselves?
I think that just comes down to being kind, being, empathetic to people.
I love it. And what is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So something that's common within the four walls of your restaurants, but not common throughout the industry.
That's a good one.
To go above and beyond.
I think I think recognition.
Yeah, recognition of
everything. Just the person, the likes, the dislikes, the connections.
See your guest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. What is one book that's a must read to be a better person or restaurant owner?
Oof, that's a good one. The Bible, I guess.
You're not the first person to recommend that, and I don't know if I'm a super religious person.
I'm not, but I think the reason why I say that is that when you meet somebody that's godly, they have a certain way that they go through life, where there's no judgment. When they had all the riots going on, I had texted some of my cooks. I'm like, guys, please be safe. I know everybody's doing these protests. And one of the girls, she goes to church every Sunday. She said, Chef, I'm just going to pray for them. So I think that when you have that connection, and I haven't read the Bible in a very long time, but I think when you have that kind of, on your side, it kind of
faith.
It brings things back to what's really important here.
Yeah.
It's because it's not about the money or the this. It's about treating people the way you want to be treated and with respect. And I think that those are the core values that are in the Bible that really kind of like ground you very quickly.
I love it. What is one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
I think the biggest thing actually I'm seeing the shift now, is what we need to do is two things. The disparage between front and back of the house in terms of wages, and now the focus being more on diversity in restaurants.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, name one service you've hired or outsourced to. So this is like an entity, a business entity that does something really well, and you outsource to that company to do the thing for you.
So, accounting company.
Okay.
They keep me in check.
Who's your accountant?
His name is Henry. He's the happiest person. Every time I call him, he's just like high on life. I'm like, Henry, why the hell are you so happy? I'm miserable. He's like, life is beautiful. The sun is shining.
Is he based here in New Orleans?
He is.
All right.
Yeah.
Look out. You're about to get some business. Henry. Was it Henry?
Henry, yeah.
All right. What's the name? Do you know the name of his business?
It's called ASU.
ASU.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. There you go. Shout out, Henry. And same thing, but what's one technology, a tool that you've outsourced to impact your communication, your efficiency, your profitability, anything along those lines?
Well, I think it comes down to the costing.
Okay.
Our payroll and everything, those systems we have in place. It's just even something as you have your POS system. That pulls all your information up, and that is really important in the sense of tracking your sales, your menu mix, all those things. I think those things are right there, and I think a lot of people should use them a little bit more.
Do you know specifically which tools you're leveraging so we can share those?
Well, right now we're using Micros, and that gives you a breakdown of every single thing.
Okay.
You know, people's hours, you know.
And does that implement or does that work with your, you're talking about HR, does it connect or what's the word? Come on, Eric, think. You can tell it's been a long week. Integration, does it integrate with your HR?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
And what are you using for HR?
We have a person.
Okay, cool. Awesome. This is the last question. It's a doozy. Are you ready for it?
Uh-huh.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure. You're not necessarily dying or anything like that. You didn't get COVID. Maybe you're going to Mars.
Right.
And you can only leave 3 pieces of wisdom behind. For the good of humanity and for your legacy, what would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Definitely use salt.
Use salt. Number 1.
Have fun when you're cooking and eating.
Have fun.
And share with people you love.
And share it with people you love. Nina Compton, I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much. We wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. That's how we found you.
Call somebody out.
Yes.
Who called me out? Diego?
Diego Galicia called you out. That's why you're here. And he was right to get you on the show.
Oh, I need to call somebody out?
So who's somebody you respect and admire and believe would make a great guest like you made for us? If you were to find out this person was on the show, you would listen to the show because you would want to learn
Well, it
something.
would be my best friend, Michael Parolo.
Michael Parolo.
Yes.
Look out.
He is, we have a line that we say between each other. We say when keeping real goes wrong because he's just so honest.
And who's he associated with? What restaurant?
It's called Maculina in Miami.
All right.
Yeah,
Look out. That was Michael.
Yes.
I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And how can we connect? Maybe we want to come join your team. Maybe we resonated with what you had to share today and we want to come get mentored by you. What's the best way to get in touch?
Call the restaurant.
Call the restaurant. Social handles?
I just do his Instagram, so it's Nina Compton.
Okay, beautiful. Nina, thank you so much. I'm not sure what episode number this is going to be. Make sure you guys stick around for the closing thoughts. I'll share the episode number. Just head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/whatever the episode number is. We'll have a summary of today's discussion, as well as links to any tools or services recommended during today's chat. Nina Compton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can't say it enough. There is no question. You are unstoppable.
Thank you.
Cheers.